Thank you. And also, I would like to raise your attention that we have this chat function where you can address questions to the speakers or to the participants in general who are present in the webinar today. Also, we will have an opportunity to discuss and ask questions and get answers from our expert today at the end of the webinar. So that is, in a nutshell, what we are planning for today. Now I will start the video and then I will pass the floor to Goran. I hope you could enjoy the video and you could get all the necessary information which describe the frameworks of our social impact vouchers program and the national, also the transnational funds, in which we will get an introduction now from Goran Jarash. So Goran, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tamas, for the introduction. Thank you for everybody who has decided to participate on this webinar. Our topic today will be social impact funds. So we will be talking in general about the concept of social impact funds. So what they are and what is their purpose and how they differ from traditional investment funds. And we will also talk about our path through the project on the specific example to see what was our learning curve and what we have experienced in our attempt to create a similar fund that would be supporting the mission that was presented in a video. So the support of the employment of various social group through financing and issuing of specialized targeted vouchers in participating countries. Maybe just before I start with the presentation, a few words about me and the organization I come from. So my name is Goran Jeras. I'm the cooperative manager of Cooperative for Ethical Financing, the organization that exists for the last 8 years and this was formed in 2014 in Croatia. And our mission of our cooperative members is to set up innovative financial instruments that are going to support the development of sustainable economy. We are part of the wider European program to set up a digital ethical bank, the bank that will have its portfolio 100% invested in sustainable projects, and under sustainable we see it as it is defined by the United Nations criteria of sustainable development goals, which comprise both environmental and social criteria. Now I will move to the presentation so that we can go through the process through the slides that will guide us to the rest of the presentation. As I said, there will be in 2 parts. First, the general about social impact funds, and the second one about our experiences with social impact funds through the social impact vouchers project. Just a second. So I hope you can see my screen. Okay, Tomasz is nodding, so I know everything is all right. The aim of social impact vouchers project was to design voucher systems, vouchers that are going to finance employment of various social groups. Vouchers were chosen as a model because of its flexibility and traceability, so that we can specify activities that are helping employee seekers to get the employment, and on the other side, the frameworks that is helping employers to accept employees from the certain social groups. And in order to manage the sustainability of the whole voucher process, our project aim was to create a fund that will be able to recover part of the funds and finance the voucher system on the long term. This fund was supposed to be in a form of a social impact fund. When we are talking about social impact funds, there is not a formal definition of a social impact fund. So social impact fund is called social impact fund because of its aims and goals that are going further than from the classic profitability goals. But if you look at the bigger picture of investments, then we can basically divide investments to 2 major categories. One are investments that are financial investments, in a way that the priority for the investor is to return and to achieve expected or maximum possible financial profit, while the other one is investment to invest into a mission, into some purpose, which has also profitability goals, because otherwise it won't be called investment. But also next to this financial return, also to some achievement of the social impact. Social impact investment is very closely related also to the concept of grant making and philanthropy, because many of the social purposes and social missions cannot and should not be seen as profitable investments, because it is very difficult to achieve profit for many very valuable social and non-commercial activities, which are still very important for the society. But there is this overlapping area in which it is possible to see that social impact can also generate revenues, which make to various degrees the investment in that kind of of projects sustainable or more sustainable on the long term from the financial perspective of ability to recover at least some or all of the funds invested, and even in some cases generate the profit. If we look to this landscape, we see that we have also various sub-degrees. So we have traditional mainstream market capitalist companies that are oriented exclusively to the profit making, because that's what is the whole concept of investing. But we also have companies that are on various degrees aware about their social and environmental responsibility, which means that they are allocating percentage of their profits to some charities or some other social goals in another way. We have the whole development of the corporate social responsibility framework, in which many companies have realized that in order to ensure the long-term sustainability of their business within the communities and within the environment where it is operating, it is important to emphasize social and environmental impact of their activities. However, in traditional businesses, it is still seen as a secondary in a way that various degrees of the shares of the profit are invested in different social and environmental causes, but without strategic and structural setup of the company in order to assess the whole impact of its activities. On the other side, we have socially driven businesses, and we have social enterprises who are not only distributing the part of their profit to social and environmental goals, but are also designing their business activities and their internal and external structure, the relationship with all stakeholders, to ensure that first what they do is to to provide positive impact, and on the second level that this impact needs to be also financially sustainable and can bring to break even or profitable outcomes. We also on the other side have the charities, which do not have the aim to generate any kind of the revenue, but of course, as in any other activity, is if the activity could be done from the economically more efficient way, so that the part of the activity could be refinanced by itself through the revenue generation or donation recovery, then of course it makes sense also to make that effort, because it increases the impact and the effect of those organizations. If you look at it from the perspective of risk, we have this classical perception from the financial institutions and financial actors, in which all program-related investments, which are actually aiming to provide some kind of the social impact, are also bearing higher risk and are usually not providing expected market rate returns on the level that is expected from the perceived risk of operations. While on the other side, of course, if we have some kind of the commercial investments, then we also have different types of risk that are depending on the level of the company, but generally the risk is always correlated with the return expectations. So higher the risk, higher also the return expectation in the traditional commercial companies. If we are looking for the type of investments, so social impact funds, they are able to invest so they're generally investment funds. They are able to invest in any type of asset class or structure. They also have, they do not have any kind of the limits on the expected financial return. Just in practice, it is the case that in most cases the social impact funds have lower return expectations because many of the activities that bear impact cannot provide the expected high returns of the classical investors in a short term. However, I must say here that the whole measurement of the risk and of the profitability is because of the present day's accountancy rules bound to short-term periods. So all investments are measured on the level of their annual return with quarterly or annual financial reports, which I don't think is always it is not the right measure, since long-term risk of the activities, especially activities that do not have sustainability in its core operations, is quite questionable. And this is something which also leads to different policy measures who are trying also to create a framework in which even the classical companies will start thinking about long-term sustainability of their operations and start shifting toward more awareness about the social and environmental impact that they are doing, which can also be then reflected in the expectations of the returns of those traditional companies. So generally, why social impact funds and social impact investing is so difficult? Mostly because it is a more complex field and area than traditional investment. So in the classical investment thesis, the investors are looking for the repayments, revenue, savings, refinancing, growth, liquidity, all those kind of elements of the business plan and expectations in order to decide to make the investment. On the other side, social impact actors need to do all of that to persuade the investors to invest in them. But next to that, they also need to develop so-called impact thesis, which is basically also setting the whole range of the criteria which are demonstrating what kind of social or environmental impact their activities do have. So basically, what we have here is quite clear that it is an area which is very difficult to rapidly develop without changing in the financial and legislation framework, because there is it is more demanding than running the classical classical enterprise. It usually offers lower return rates. And most of the impact that it produces is still seen as a kind of the intangible or difficult to measure, not in terms of the impact itself, but on the impact of the financial value of the impact created, because usually all social and environmental aspects have their monetary value reflected on the long term, which is not reflected in annual financial reports. So that is a common challenge that is still preventing and slowing down the development of social investment sector, because just the international financial reporting system is not ready yet to accept and count in the impact value in the balance sheets of the companies on the way that would that would clearly demonstrate the advantages, long-term advantages of social businesses and social enterprises. If we look what is considered as sustainable from the perspective of social impact funds, there is quite a wide range of the possibilities, but mostly they are related to addressing one or several of the sustainable development goals developed by the United Nations. Since before the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals, there were different and various definitions and aspects for the impact targets. But luckily, the SDG framework developed by UN has created also the highest possible level, so on the international level framework, which defines and prioritizes what are the elements of sustainable development. And many, if not all, of the social impact funds then choose one or several of those topics here that are listed here as their mission and their target to support actors, so social enterprises and other social economy actors who are addressing one of those issues. So maybe just quickly to go through them. So we have the goals of eliminating poverty, eliminating hunger on the planet, on increasing good health and well-being of all individuals on the planet, on access and provision of quality education to everybody, especially children that need to have access to schools, but also to the concept of the lifelong learning, to promote and establish principles of the gender equality in both social and economic sphere of the life, to provide clean water and sanitation facilities to all population, to provide affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth. Here, the economic growth is also determined from the perspective of the sustainable growth, which means that it cannot exploit more of the natural resources than the planet has capacity to replenish. To support industry, innovation, and the infrastructure that is providing jobs and quality of life of people, to reduce inequalities from all different social groups and the nations on the planet level, to provide sustainable cities and communities, including affordable, high-quality housing for most of for all of the people, to create value chains that are able to ensure a responsible consumption and production, which is also including fair trade concepts and the concepts of the recycling and the reuse of products that are produced. To provide for the climate action, to protect life below water and life on land, and to develop peace, justice, and strong institutions who are then developed through the global partnership to achieve those goals. If you look, this is quite high-level framework, but it is much further developed in many of those aspects to other multinational agreements. For example, one of the most visible and most developed one is the Paris Agreement about climate action and the reduction of the CO2 emissions. But there are also many other agreements that are then tackling each of those elements of the sustainable development. If you look some of the examples of the social impact funds, it's actually, as I said, still quite a niche in the financing sector. So estimated by GIN, Global Impact Investment Network, is that currently globally only about 1.5%, so 1.5% of all investments on the planet are done in a sustainable way. So it illustrates how far we need to go in order to increase that number. And the reason why it is a niche is quite visible if you look for the examples of existing social impact funds. So we have, for example, the British ESMEE FAIRBAIRN fund that has the average term of investment for 6 years. But the returns, if you see the returns on the fund, on the money invested, are 2.8% of the gross returns or 2% of the net returns, which is much lower than the expectations of the most of other investment funds. However, if you look their performance in the terms of risk, it shows also that they had only 7 defaults out of 116 of total investments, which is around 5%, which is actually showing that the risk of the fund, the risk of those type of investments is in practice lower than the perceived risk of classical investors, who would say that this niche is probably more risky than other types of investments. If you look other example of the pilot fund, MLI pilot fund from Germany, we have the total volume of the fund of 700,000 euros with also duration up to 6 years, where the net return is of 2%. Which is also, as I said, quite low and not attractive for many of the investors who are seeking for higher returns. This fund is quite interesting because it was the first fund that was set up under so-called EU SIV regulation. EU SIV is the regulation of the European Union, of the European Commission. EU SIV is the acronym for abbreviation of European Social Entrepreneurship Fund, a special type of fund that is dedicated to invest in social economy. However, this EU SIV has proven to be quite complicated and quite expensive for the management, and even though the EU is pushing a lot to enable and to push for more EU SIV registered funds, it still hasn't materialized on the level that EU has expected. So now in the new programming period of 2021-2027, there is envisioned the whole range of tax breaks and other incentives that would support creation of more EU SIV types of funds. Just recently, a few months ago in Croatia, we had the start of the Feels Good Venture Capital Fund. The fund that is also requiring that all of the investments need to address at least one of the sustainable development goals of the UN. The fund has started with 30 million euros of investments. Is also designed to last for 7 years, and up to now they have invested around 10% of the funds, which is quite good result in regarding the short time of just 3 months of the funds existence. So maybe just to recap, what are the issues? Issues with social impact funds are that there are higher demands for the fund managers and for the investors and for the projects, for the beneficiaries. So they need both to take care about the financial and impact related side. The fund managers also need to establish the impact measurement process, which still doesn't have a standardized methodology. So it is quite different from fund manager to fund manager and from organization to organization how the impact will be measured. When we don't have a standardized impact measurement process, it is also then makes it different to compare between different funds and different beneficiaries, which makes the whole process, let's say, more complex and a little bit more vague than it is with the classical investment, where financial returns are very clear and straightforward criteria to measure. The part of the problem is with undeveloped financial ecosystem. As I said, if you look traditional investments, there is a variety of options for all needs of traditional companies. So from seed investors, bank loans, venture capital, private equity, all different innovative instruments like crowd investment, crowdfunding, etc. So there is the whole set of options on the disposal for classical companies. But if you look at the ecosystem of social enterprises and social economy actors, it is much more limited. It comes down to philanthropists and foundations that are mostly busy with the donations and grants. And a few emerging impact investment funds and philanthropic funds who are just gaining ground, but it is still quite possible that many of the beneficiaries just do not fit in the mission which is currently presented, which is currently offered on the market. There is also perception of social enterprises and social investments as not real businesses. It is partly true, but I think that it is because of the definition of business, which is reflecting only financial returns. As I said previously, sustainability is something which, in the just essence of the word, should be in a core of each of the human activities. What are the consequences of not being sustainable? It is disappearance. So if you are not sustainable, we are not going to be here in some period. And sustainability is not something which is negotiable. So we cannot see, oh, we have the aim to become 30% sustainable. If we are 30% sustainable, it still means that we are 70% unsustainable, which means that just this end date of our company, or if you look at a bigger picture of our species, is a little bit further away, but it is still going to come. So if you are not sustainable, you die sooner or later, and it is still not reflected in business policies, which I think is one of the major deficiencies of the current accountancy and the economic system. The problem is also a difficulty to scale up, because social impact is very much related to environment and the geography and social culture and social values of the beneficiaries. So the same thing that works in some social context does not necessarily work in another social context. So it always needs to be some kind of the tailor-made approach to achieve social impact. Also it is clear that there is a huge gap between the competencies and the wording and knowledge of financial actors, especially traditional financial actors, who are just now learning about sustainability through ESG governance framework, which I will be mentioning a little bit later on as well, and the actors of social and impact economy that usually do not understand the way of functioning expectations of the traditional financial actors. So there is still quite a big gap that needs to be bridged in order to increase the level of social investments. What are the opportunities, and why there is actually quite a lot of it really makes sense to talk about this further and to work on this and to develop both new social projects, but also new social investment instruments. There is a global political agenda towards sustainability. So from aforementioned UN principles towards the perception and raising awareness of citizens, we now understand that there are physical limits of the exploitation of this planet, but also of the society, of many social groups, so that if we need to sustain ourselves, that we need to deal with the sustainability issues on a larger scale, actually to put it into a core of our activities. This political agenda, especially on the level of European Union, but also US, is becoming more and more reflected in the so-called ESG framework. ESG is establishing environmental, social, and governance requirements for companies. Currently, in the European Union, there is a so-called non-financial directive in power. So it was established in 2016, which requires all public companies and all big companies, all publicly listed companies, to next to their financial reports, to also prepare a non-financial report of their activities. Unfortunately, in many implementation, it is still related mostly to CSR activities, so to corporate social responsibility, or explanations and description how the part of the profit is given to some good social causes. But just now, as we speak in European Parliament, there is an upgrade of the directive under the debate, which will be most likely voted in the next few months, so definitely before end of the year, which will specify to the much more detailed extent what should be the content of this non-financial reporting directive. The companies will be required to exactly measure the direct impact of their activities, of their business operations, and not only of the distribution of their profit. And they will have a much more elaborated framework on which they need to report. So that's something that is going to happen very soon. And the obligation to do non-financial reporting will be expanded from big companies and public companies, publicly listed companies, to all enterprises, all entrepreneurs, except micro entrepreneurs, which are considered that it would have too much burden for them to do that. So that's something that's coming. This ESG criteria of both environmental impact, social impact, and governance. Governance also includes the transparency of ownership, prevention of tax evasion, all the relationships with and the inclusion of different stakeholders in the co-decision making process of the strategy and operational activities of the company. So this ESG framework will be integrated with public procurement and public funding criteria. So it means that it will bring additional points to those who have a better score on their impact, and they will have advantage in public procurement processes, and they will have easier access to the European funds. But at the same time, through this raising awareness of the citizens, demand is coming also from the market, where people more and more want to buy and to invest their money and to work, to be employed by companies who are aware of their impact on all those aspects, and who are actually actively working to have positive impact of their activities on both society and the environment. Maybe just a comment on one subtopic of the social impact funds, that's social impact bonds. So basically, what is the social impact bond as a concept? It is a concept in which some of the social activities is invested by investors. So investor is investing in some activity which is providing positive social impact. And depending on the target outcomes, so there are defined outcomes, the goals that this activity needs to achieve. If those are met, then the investors are repaid their investment plus some return on the investment. Basically, this is a direct payment scheme in which somebody who is interested in achievement of the social outcome, that's usually the state or some kind of entity who is generally providing the funding for social impact, sees that it will be more efficient to provide that service if there will be investor who is willing to invest to risk his own money to the process of achieving that impact, which is then compensated with additional return if it achieves the targets. What is the difference? The difference actually, at least in theory, that since it is a result driven, there will be higher effort of the service provider to meet the impact goals, because it will get benefits of achieving them. So it is not like giving money and that's it without checking on the outcomes. In theory, it could also expand the capacity of the investments in social services from public sector to also private sector, because this impact could guarantee some returns to the investors, and it will be tied with quite exact impact measurement policies, how this impact is measured and controlled in the whole process. There are many examples of social impact bonds. There are over 50 of them that already have been launched, with many of them in development. From impact bonds in the UK, where there are first implementations which are focused on helping recidivists, so the people who were getting out of jail, to get employment and to prevent them doing something which would bring them to the jail again, to the provision of child services. In Portugal, there is impact bond which offers additional complementary education for the primary school children, and based on their success in that process is paying them about the level of their participation. So there are many examples of it. However, it is still area where there is not much experience. The experience from all those examples is just now monitored and being analyzed to see how to improve and how to structure the whole model. And in most of the cases, it turns out that still the number of funds invested by private sector is limited compared to the amount of funds paid by government, who uses social impact bond as a way of outsourcing some of its social services, with the hope and expectation that this outsourcing will lead to more efficient and a better impact of the service, which is sometimes true, but in many cases it also has proven to be not always the case that is achieved. I see social impact bonds as something which has potential, but still needs to find its exact structure, how could be applied in many contexts. contexts. And one of the possibilities is that ESG framework will also provide additional opportunities to increase of the private participation in social impact bond financing. Maybe just now quickly to go through our project and what was our plan and what were our lessons learned through the process of trying to set up social impact fund for our social impact vouchers, so for the employment purposes. First, that we, as every other fund manager, needs to fund initiator need to find us actually how to structure their fund. We wanted to see if the fund is going to be licensed, which means supervised by one of the financial authority agencies with all the consequences that it and benefits that it leads. So the licensed funds are regulated and are then full partners on the financial markets, have much higher ability to fund to raise capital from institutional investors. On the other side, unlicensed funds are funds that are flexible because they cannot do public offerings, but they have ability to attract donors or investors who then have agreement with the fund itself without supervision, which then makes it more risky from the perspective of investor, but much more flexible in this pilot phase. We also needed to see who could be our investors. Is it private, public sector, or mixed? And we also were discussing about the structuring of the funds as national funds that would be covering the countries that are participating in the project, or transnational fund that would be covering several countries at the same time. We also wanted to see what are realistic expectations and who are our target groups of investors or donors. Are those who are looking for the financial return or impact and or a combination of both, and what is realistic to achieve, who to access, what group of investors is realistic to access for the particular purpose of our fund. We compared the benefits of all options, licensed and unlicensed. Basically, to summarize this list, licensed funds had the ability to attract higher volumes of funds from institutional investors, and can operate and distribute funds on a larger scale. However, it's a quite complex regulatory process, which also bears a lot of costs on the management and implementation of the fund, which usually leads that there is some minimum threshold below which it is just not feasible to have such a fund with all formal regulatory requirements. Depending from country to country, that size is around 5 million euros or more. In many other countries, even higher than that, which then puts quite high barrier initially to set up a fund. On the other side, the unlicensed funds they have this major deficit of not being able to attract higher volumes of money from institutional investors, but have much more flexibility to pilot and to experiment, especially for such an innovative project as was issuing of the vouchers for the employment purposes. maybe not to go through all the details. At the end, what we have decided that we will be going for the unregulated social impact fund, and that we will actually have both national funds and transnational fund. So 4 partners from 4 countries have decided to join their efforts together to a transnational fund, while 4 other countries have chosen to, because of their mandate, their restriction, and their vision, to establish a national fund for the support of the vouchers. So we basically decided to go for both of those approaches. We are also planning for the transnational fund to establish it in quite an innovative way through formation of a special legal entity, which is designed by European law, and it's a form of the European Cooperative Society, which will be not for profit in a way that it will not aim to create a profit for its operators, but will manage the fund on a not-for-profit way, and which would then be some kind of the interesting hybrid, because the cooperative model allows investment from investor members to beneficiary members. Since it is the special legal form designed by the European Commission, it in theory should have been the same and valid in all EU member states, without differences that are quite frequently present for other types of legal entities. However, in reality, we realized we were faced with a lot of challenges. Some of those were quite dramatic. So our project started before the pandemic, and through pandemic, a lot of things have changed. They have dramatically changed the labor market, the ability of movement of people, the type of jobs that are allowed to operate under the pandemic closed down conditions. There was a massive public funding through all different channels all over Europe to preserve jobs, which also have put different focus from the official government policies, from job creation to job preservation. There was a huge change in the working environment. There was inability to hold in-person trainings, educations, coachings, or meetings of the partners. And the generally private investment market has shrinked immediately, and everybody, most of the private investors were more reserved and more distanced from the investing, especially in such an innovative project, until the situation about the pandemic resolves and clarifies. It also created a lot of organizational challenges in which, also partly due to the lack of communication, the partners didn't have opportunity maybe to invest additional effort of the creation of common joint models. There were legal challenges in creation of transnational fund, because in practice it turned out that the European Cooperative Society is very differently interpreted by national governments from country to country, even though it was supposed to be a uniform structure across all of EU. And there was also funding difficulty to find to position the mission of the fund for transnational investments, because there were different social groups that different partners wanted to address. Also, one of the strengths of the project was a diversity of voucher models, where we have defined different approaches to support the labor creation or employment activities. That was one of the goals of the projects, to explore what kind of voucher systems are possible to and that can lead to some goals. But on the other side, it is difficult to present it to investors when we have a variety of the models, because some of them are maybe more close to them because of the social groups targeted. Some of them are not so interested for different types of private investors. It was clear that there is not a straightforward path toward the financial sustainability in the employment services, especially of targeted social groups, and that traditionally this kind of the support was mostly related to donations and not so much on the investments from private sector. There were, as I said, a variety of target groups and beneficiaries. There was a lack of structural private investor incentives because some countries are offering some types of the tax breaks for this kind of investments, while other countries are not. So it was not harmonized on the level of operations of our project. And also, we have seen that that national funds are usually small and not very attractive for investors. Hungary was exception because they managed to find a very good model how to combine their national fund with recovery and resilience program that the European Union created after the pandemic. But for the other cases, it was clear that the size is also something that helps investors to get extra interests. What we faced was the key issue: how to combine investor expectations, which is return, with labor market support interventions, which usually cannot create profit over short term. The generally topic of supporting employment, even in donation and philanthropic circles, is very difficult is not very high, especially for the employment support in Europe, which is seen as and which is actually the place with the most developed social nets that we see, and employment services, publicly provided employment services, if you look on the global level. So it is much easier to find investors to support employment in undeveloped countries than in European countries. And also somehow the public investors who require large size and are not so much interested in in finding pilot programs, usually also have some kind of the feeling that our initiative could be competition to public employment policies that are already in place and run by government. That's kind of the issue that we were facing in the whole process. However, we managed to find a solution. Our transnational fund, which is donation-based fund under the brand of Next Access, has been launched and is operated in Slovenia by our Slovenian partner, and with the contribution of partners from Germany, Austria, and Croatia. National funds have also been established with again Hungarian example as the fund that already managed to integrate with reconstruction and resilience program of the Commission, and also attract quite significant amount in its size. What is the way forward? In any case, we need to build up on the experiences that are achieved through the project, and demonstrate and promote positive use cases that get out of the project. We need to determine possibility for scaling it up, especially to see which of the use cases and of the voucher implementation have the highest possibility for replication and expansion. Because if we have one voucher model which is quite significant and big, then we can start looking for the investors to scale this particular vouchers model up. and then we can repeat the same process with the other voucher models. But the reality is that in order to present it to investors, we cannot just say we have that we have 8 different voucher models, but we need to focus so group by group and model by model to promote. We may consider also a way how to integrate it, how to utilize concept of social impact bonds, because that is the most straightforward way of financial compensation for the fund. If it turns out that approach with voucher systems leads to more employment than the classical labor support instruments, then it is a very good argument to structure it in a way that that it is paid for by public, but and also maybe private investors to increase the efficiency of the labor policies in place. And I see also we see potential of integrating it with non-financial reporting requirements, which is actually first attempt how the requirements of measuring social impact will directly lead to profitability and the market attractiveness and accessibility of different funding sources of companies from the private sector, and having positive contribution in employment policies is something which can also then improve the market position and the sustainability scoring of private companies through this new legislative framework, which is now coming into place. So that's about lessons learned from our project. Here I will be ending my presentation, and of course I stay open for all comments and questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Goran, for this comprehensive and very detailed introduction to the world of social impact funds and social financing, and especially presenting our achievements and lessons learned regarding establishing social impact financing models and funds in the frameworks of SIV project. It's always great to have a let's say retrospective overview where we have started from and what we have achieved, and maybe it helps a bit to understand what we have done and why we have done it during the last 3 years. So thank you very much for that. While you will get some breath after this this long presentation, I would like to raise the attention of the those who are present. We have a link where you can evaluate the webinar while we are having this questions and answers part of the webinar. So while we are having discussions on the social impact funds, and also would like to ask you, if you don't mind, to provide your names and organization names in the chat box.
Tomasz, you are muted.
I am really sorry for that. I didn't realize. I don't know how long time you didn't hear my speech, maybe from the very beginning.
After the link that you shared.
Yes.
Then wonderful. The floor is yours again. So please, if you have any question or remark or topic to be discussed, feel free to start the conversation.
Yeah, maybe I do start today. Thank you, Goran. I was really impressed by this great presentation. And yeah, it came in my mind. I have 2 questions to you. In which kind of fund you see the most growth in the future? This would be one question, but it's a little bit a special question, I know. And the second one, because I'm a little bit interested in this crowd fund issue. How do you think about this crowdfunding in general, and how do you see the the future of the crowdfunding? Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe just the first question about in which fund I see the most opportunity for growth, regarding from the funds from the project or generally? Well, I didn't understand the first one.
In general, and of course, then concerning the project, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Generally, I'm kind of the idealist, which often my expectations do not lead immediately to the reality how it turns out. But I strongly believe that we need to have a reform of our economic and financial system if we want to improve or even survive as a society. I think that shifting towards sustainability in the form of social impact funds actually has no alternative. So I believe that the process that has started with those global policies and is now still largely voluntary, in which companies and investors are willfully, voluntarily adopting some of the recommendations and the policies of measuring and ensuring that they provide positive impact, is just the beginning. I believe that a lot of those things that are currently not visible in our accountancy from both social and environmental thing are going to start appearing there. So I really hope that actually the whole sector of social investing is the one that will not remain some kind of the niche and separate weird animal in the zoo, but that it is actually direction where the mainstream financial sector should go. However, how quickly we are going to see that, and if it is going to happen, it depends on many factors. But through my experience and work in both commercial financial institutions and the social oriented businesses, I really don't think that on the long term we have an alternative but to shift towards the social impact way of doing business in general. So it should be like the business, not the business as we have it now, including the financial business. Crowd investment and crowdfunding is something which I think has a very important role in it, because with the development of information communication technologies and the new also financial and investment platforms, now ordinary people have more and more opportunities to directly participate and support with their savings and their money the goals that they want to. Combined with this awareness about sustainability, and especially younger generations that we see are especially aware about all those different aspects of the sustainability, that more and more people will be deciding to personally support causes and goals they believe in, and that it offers a lot of opportunity for having a really big expansion of crowdfunding and crowd investment models. However, there is always some kind of the framework that must ensure that the things are going right, and it is not some kind of the what we see quite frequently, whitewashing or greenwashing, or I don't know how we will call social washing, but where it is presented on one way that investment is achieving some positive impact, but there is no real measurement tool how to ensure of that. So I think that the first step will be, and it is already happening partially also through all different methodologies for impact measurement that are coming and becoming more and more important in business and financial decision making. making. That first we established a new type of impact measurement, so-called, let's say, even the new type of the balance sheet of the economical actors, and then this will also definitely be supported by people who want to have their money used for some sustainable development, because after all, everybody wants to have, or at least should want to have to do something that will leave a better society and better planet to their children. So I think that crowd investment is definitely going to emerge, not emerge, but to expand much more than it is already now, that it is gradually going to replace a lot of the traditional financial instruments, and that it will be one of the factors that will motivate also traditional financial instruments to start changing and to start providing the type of the impact that actually their investors and their, again, people want and expect from them. That definitely a lot more transparency is going to come into the whole financial sector.
Thank you for the answer, Goran, for these questions. Maybe anybody else from the participants, from the attendees who are particularly interested in financing social issues, social impacts?
My presentation was too long. Everybody became hungry. So it's...
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, actually, I was really so fascinated of this presentation. Also, I had a lot of questions still, but I didn't want to take the place now. But if I have now the possibility, yeah, of course, I would also like to know how you see this social impact bonds in this case also, so in general. And then you said about this social impact fund and this 1.5%, how I have it in mind now. So what do you think? You said it will increase, but what is your feeling, in which intensity, and could you say a prediction about the percentage and all that? And how do you see then finally our, because this is also a good question for us, our social impact fund idea then in regards to our project finally?
Yes, social impact bonds, I have personally mixed feelings about it. One is that in many countries who started implementing social impact bonds, it was presented as an innovative social instrument, but in fact the policy of the state was to outsource some of the social functions. And that is something which I generally don't think is a good idea, especially when we are talking about social activities which per definition are not going to be profitable. Outsourcing it from the states, just from the state and public funding, just leads to a higher degree of uncertainty of the whole sector. And that's something which, if it is done, needs to be done very, very carefully. And generally, I don't think it is a good approach. However, social impact bonds as a tool to innovate and find new models how social services could be provided. That's something which I think is very useful. And if the purpose of the social impact bonds would be to motivate innovators or people who have idea how some social problem, social issue could be addressed better than in the way it is addressed now, then I think it could be a great tool that that could be run to get that kind of innovation process. However, if it is becoming then not only innovation but something that gets mainstreamed, then it also probably needs to get to the point where there is some kind of the sustainability ensured through public funding about the continuation of that service. If we look this gap, what I mentioned, the 1.5% of the global investments, I think it's really showing, it's demonstrating how wrongly we as a society have addressed our economy. It is just incredible that now when we know those figures and we started thinking about long-term sustainability from all aspects, it is still debate about very few topics like CO2 emissions, without addressing the whole variety of other topics that are similarly or as damaging as that. So it's not only about CO2, it is about waste management, it is about energy consumption, it is about biodiversity, it is about ecological production or the poisoning of soil with different artificial products that are not sustainable. It is about inequality between different social groups, gender inequality. So a lot of aspects that are actually marginalized while the focus is put just to the one element of the sustainability, while sustainability is quite a holistic thing. It is not one topic that addresses everything, but we need to be sustainable in all those aspects to be sustainable. So I think that unfortunately we need different types of warning signs as we have it now with the climate change, but we got it with the pandemic, which also demonstrates a lot of deficiencies that we have in our system. Probably now, because of the war, we will have it additional reminders from the point of food and energy security. But it all demonstrates how fragile system we have created, the economic system we have created. And it will definitely need to have some kind of the reform because otherwise it will collapse and we have no alternative. How quickly this kind of shift is going to happen, it's also on us. We as citizens are here to demand that kind of shift from our governments, and there is personal responsibility in each of us to work towards that goal. And with our funds, if we have some, to make sure that we don't contribute to activities that are falling out of those 1.5%. You know, it's and it's something which people usually do not think about. But we all have some money in pension funds, and we don't ask ourselves where the money from those pension funds go in. Maybe we also have in some I don't know, other saving funds or somewhere. And I think that we should much more think about our personal position in contribution to financial sector, and of course the political responsibility that we have to ask our governments to make the necessary change.
Thank you again, Goran. As I see, participants started to leave the meeting, so maybe a last opportunity or chance for questions, remarks. If there are no questions and remarks, that means hopefully everything was clear. Of course, the presentation and the materials of the webinar will be later available on the SIV webpage. please, those who has not done it yet, click on the link on the evaluation link of the webinar and evaluate the session if you don't mind. And I also would like to raise your attention on our next webinar on the 19th of May from 10 to 11:30 in the morning about social impact voucher programs. So those programs which have been or will be financed by the social impact funds and financing schemes set up in the social impact vouchers program. So we will get a, let's say, a comprehensive and detailed introduction into the world of social impact vouchers for labor market developments and the labor market innovations for developing employment in Central European countries. Thank you again for being present. Goran, thank you for your presentation, informative and beneficial afternoon which we could spend together. So that was from my side. Have a nice afternoon to all of you and see you after tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.